All right, thanks. Yeah.
All right.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, let me start, Manohar. Thanks.
Okay.
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us for the EIV Webinar Community 101. We have Manohar Kabeer with us, who has been working in the community building space for quite some time. For quite some time now, he has a decade of experience in filmmaking. He said, and I was very unsure of a decade of experience. You look pretty young. Are you sure? This is what we're telling people. But a conversation with him has really left me uh, spellbound, and I've questioned myself on so many things that we're doing on building this community. And I thought that we should take it to our AIV community for people to understand more on whether they're building a group, whether they're building a community. I will not waste a lot of time and will let Manohar take a lead. He'll speak for 45 minutes, he says, but he'll break in between, hopefully, Manohar, and then we can move on for Q&A. We have a team members here if you have any questions. Thanks everyone. Please put in your questions in chat as and when you have them. Over to you, Manohar. Thank you. And we welcome you.
All right. So while Megha trapped me into that poster conversation without telling me, I have some revenge to take from her, which I'll try to do across the slide. And the reason I have a decade of experience, which I recently realized, is because I did not complete my education. I left engineering in between. So I started working relatively early across filmmaking, content creation. And as things evolved in the content space, I realized that behavioral change and how consumers respond to your brand, those kind of questions are important. And I got attracted to the startup and tech world in the for-profit space. And that's how I shifted from content and community. I have worked for a couple of brands, and my intention today would be to introduce you to some of the frameworks, concepts, ideas that the for-profit world utilizes in their attempt to make a community amongst their consumers. They have different intentions, different brands have different intentions. We'll try to touch upon them. What we'll do is take some questions at the end, and in between, if you have any difference of opinion, please do put it in the chat. I would love, because it's not really a holy grail, right? Community science is an evolving area. So the most enriching conversations around it would likely have difference of opinion. So with that, I would begin. And when I was discussing with Megha, one of the metaphors that occurred to me was this thing about whether building a community is more like a party or a potluck. And you can have either of them, right? When you are engaging a group, you can have a party or a potluck. But there is a value-driven difference between both of them. In a party, different people are invited, you're hosting them, their degree of participation is limited. You want to deliver a certain message or experience to them, that's why you choose that structure. In a potluck, the objective is different. You try to involve them. They bring in their own food dishes from different cultures, different tastes, different flavors. Somebody might bring packaged food, somebody might cook at home. And what collectively happens is what I like to call 2 + 3 is greater than 5. So in a potluck, the sum of total people participating is higher than their individual contribution, which is not there in case of a party. So we thought that would be an interesting premise to explore further. And if some of those realizations can be utilized to nurture your volunteering communities, I think I will feel satisfied that the session was a success. If some of these tactics help you in achieving some of the low-hanging fruits that you would have in your journeys. And talking of journeys, I'm sure anybody who is working in the nonprofit space or entrepreneurship in large would agree with this share by Majru Sultanpuri. And for those who don't understand Hindi, I'll translate it after reciting it. It says, मैं अकेला ही चला था जानिबे मंजिल, मगर लोग साथ आते गए और कारवां बनता गया. Which translates to that I left alone in the quest of my destination, but people started joining me, and we ended up being a collective, loosely translating it to a collective, though karma has its own feel and connotation. Many of you who started around working around a cause, and still you would be feeling like this at a lot of occasions. What a community does is becomes this karma, and you can make an attempt to build this karma through conscious tactics and strategies. While it's a very philosophical statement, what I need to share with you is that it's completely possible to craft a strategy, including tactics, such that you're able to create this community for yourself around your brand, around your cause, around the mission that you have. But before we talk about walking, let's talk about food, right? So it's very essential. I have a question for you, which is from your understanding of community, or if you try to think about it, and if I ask you that, give me a metaphor of a food dish, how would you best describe a community? It can be anything, across cuisines, across dishes, across main courses, side dishes, whatever comes to you. Everything is welcome. So I see some responses coming. Arya says Faluda, Kiran says candy. Okay, Shri, the question is, what is community according to you? If I have to ask you to choose a metaphor, what metaphor would you give to the definition of a community? So I can read Casata ice cream, a very lovely one, because it's very different from a regular ice cream. If you feel tempted to Google these names and find the appropriate images, please hold back till 5 p.m. and then do them. Akshay says tree. Akshay, why would you consider tree as a food dish, or you mean something in an implied sense? Sri Lakshmi says thali, great. Shehzeb Ansari says biryani. Chandni says fruits. Gopi has an adorable answer, which is dal chawal. I definitely love it. And I think, so if you try to interpret these examples, we feel like having them at different occasions, right? You cannot have biryani all 7 days. Some days you're just craving for a dal chawal. And some days you're just craving for a light meal. Kiran has an interesting answer, fungi. Biryani becomes a popular answer. All you biryani people, we should chat after this session about the interesting biryani places in our respective towns. Bhel is another interesting. I'm trying to think how Bhel could be interestingly a metaphor for community. Akshay says that related to these branches. Okay. Pizza, very popular. A lot of brands choose their names using pizza. Like one place I was working, it was called Menza, which was a combination of mentorship and pizza. So it's like slice of mentorship for people. Dosa, okay. Mobin, while I love the name and I think I have seen this dish while traveling in South India, I'm not able to imagine what a avial would be. Happy to get a small description from you for that. But do you realize that I think one of the key reasons to have this conversation at the right beginning is to emphasize that there is no universal rigid identity for a community. A lot depends on context, a lot depends on culture. So when you see X playbook or X template of a community, there is no reason to feel that it should be imitated. It should be adapted. And that adaptation process is essentially doing community science. So I think this is a great bunch of ideas. I'll just read what Shri has said. Mix of veggies, cooked, ground coconut, stirred, and add some curd. Lovely. So I'm going to Google this after this talk. Chilla is one of my favorite. But you, Akshay, you said dosa and chilla, which is basically, I consider chilla as a besan ka dosa, and dosa may be udad ka chilla. So lovely. Thanks for participating. Keep these coming. If any example occurs to you at a later point, more than welcome. You will realize at some point in the slide that how I concur with some of you. And like I said, we need to differ on these things. So happy to receive all these varied suggestions. Moving on, if I was asked that what is the one most important thing, Manohar, that anybody who's trying to build a community should know before setting on that path, that would be a small acronym that I have made called picture. So you should just, like, right at the beginning, you try to draw the picture on the whiteboard. So while you're drawing that picture, try to remember this acronym, thinking about community building. P stands for purpose, I stands for identity, and C stands for culture. Purpose, identity, and culture together, I think, make the recipe, or their convergence makes the recipe of a great company. Purpose can be different, identity can be different, and culture can be different. And at no point I tend to take a higher ground across this conversation that a certain kind of a purpose or a certain kind of a culture is better than other. It's a lot dependent on what resources you have. It's a lot dependent on what kind of objectives you have, and what kind of value systems you're driven with. But usually, a brand's purpose, in case of building a community, is a lot depend on ROI. They try to build a community amongst consumers to probably uh, affect two main metrics. One is acquisition of customers, how to get new customers at a cheaper cost. And the second is how to retain customers at a cheaper cost. And whether it is a software, a product, or a subscription plan, all of these have broadly one purpose, which is reducing the cost of acquisition or retaining the users at a cheaper price. But they don't articulate it in the same fashion. The manifestation of these objectives is somewhere in the sense that they want to create awareness about the cause or the domain they are situated in. They are trying to nurture people's growth in the journey. So if you're a B2B company wherein you have a solution like Canva, for example, where you have developed a software and you want the world to use that software, what you try to do is you try to create a Facebook group, for example, which Canva actually did. And it's a very fledgling, interesting Facebook group, wherein people from Canva's team proactively share the different features, possibilities, and ideas so that your learning curve is reduced. Initially, when you discover a new tool, you will have a good amount of friction in trying to understand the tool, getting comfortable with it. So the team tries to build a group wherein the advantage is once the organizing team or the core team has shared some of the ideas, they can be carried forward by other members. So today, if I start a community, next month or 3 months down the line, Megha, who is part of the community, could be capable enough of informing the new members about the development that has taken place. So you don't have that reliance exclusively on the people who initiated it. That's one example of it. Other purpose could be, let's say, you want to create a status by creating a community. You want to make your product sought after. So let's say Cred, for example, if you have heard, it's an application for credit card bill payments. I wouldn't say that Cred has built a community. It's more of a club, and we will understand the differences in these structures in one of the upcoming slides. But at the heart of it, what I'm trying to say, there are different purposes of building a community. It's not always giving back. While a lot of communities in the social space would have the objective of giving back, in for-profit space, it's not really that. It's about giving to the consumers certain amount of value such that they keep coming back to you, and you have a business incentive associated to it. You give them an identity wherein you create new language and new vocabulary by which your consumers are called or identified. There are war cries, there are slogans, there are conferences that you do. You give them merchandise to make them feel connected to each other and connected to the abstract cause that your community is endorsing. The third part is culture. Now, when you have purpose and identity, the third more important thing is how do your members interact with each other? It includes what you censor, what you encourage, what you allow, what you don't allow. How do you appreciate? What kind of incentive structures you have within the community? So what kind of behavior is encouraged and discouraged defines culture. And of course, there are various shades and dimension to it, but that's in a nutshell. After this big part of it, there are 4 other things that you should focus. And the concentric circle that you see on the right-hand side, my intention to share with you is that the inner circle is essentially you, wherein you start imagining a community. And then you move outwards and find the right tools to implement your vision. And then you focus on relationship with the people who are engaging with you. And finally, as a result of these 3 things, you have engagement as an outcome. The key thing here is a lot of times brands and people desire engagement very early, and they forget that without building a relationship, you may not have engagement. So my emphasis or suggestion to all of you is to focus on relationship first and then go towards engagement. I know that there are implications in terms of output. There is accountability to funding sources. You want to create impact. But if you just measure the impact on what kind of engagement you have initially without building a relationship first, which can happily take 6 months to 18 months of time on an average in a community, you're likely to get disappointed and you might feel like that you have done something wrong, but ultimately it's a science, right? So you have to focus on the relationship, and then as a result, engagement will be an outcome. How to focus on those relationships, what are the nuances, we'll see in the upcoming slides. So now, like I mentioned, that businesses have different objectives, purpose. There is a framework built by David Spinks, Ivan Hamilton, and Carrie Melissa Jones. These are community managers, veteran community managers practicing in the United States. They have developed this framework called Spaces, which you can read on your screen. I'll skip reading the verbatim. What I would invite you for is to think in your community how this framework can be applied. You can take a screenshot, the same PPT can be shared with you later, but think what is the support aspect of your volunteering community, what is the product aspect, what is the acquisition aspect, and so on. And try to design tactics and incentives such that you're fulfilling some of these verticals. Because at one point, you're not doing just to please the volunteers or appease the volunteers, you're doing it for certain outcomes. You have to be humane in those outcomes, but you have to measure them also. And talking of measurement, you need to benchmark your numbers with respect to the larger trends. So far, I haven't come across a focused report on the volunteering or nonprofit space, but the community industry trends report, which is mainly with the participants from USA, you'll be able to find that on this URL. It's published by CMX, which is the largest professional group of community builders in the world. You might be able to find some interesting numbers. And if you want to conduct similar research at your end, you can use this report as a reference. And CMX team is always very accessible for these kind of invitations where you can collaborate with them as well. The three people on the left-hand side are the creators of this framework. Now, in the previous slide, I mentioned how CRED is a club and not really a community. So similarly, there are different structures, and how do you exactly identify that what is a community, what is not a community? So let's take some examples. All of us have debit cards and credit cards. You would see a logo called Visa. It's part of a larger network, which doesn't have really a character of its own, where the identity of Manohar, Megha, or anybody doesn't matter as much. You're one of the consumers. You're one of the nodes that you see on this graph. So it is largely a network. All other sorts of categories that you see on the screen are somewhere a subset of the network. But when you try to give network a particular color or character, it can take form of a club, community, team, or a cult. A group is essentially a subset of the network. You can say that the EIV WhatsApp group as of now is a group and it's becoming a community. It depends on your conversations, your participation. How do you help each other? Do you show up often? Do you have the enough motivation to participate? And then you move from a group to a community. But essentially, a group is a very small subset of a network which doesn't have its own character or color at the beginning. A team, as we understand, it can have a hierarchical structure. Communities generally don't have a hierarchical structure unless it's a goal-oriented decision. So a cricket team is a good example wherein having a hierarchy, having a captain, deputy captain, having an order, the roles being defined is very useful for the success and the outcomes of the team. Similarly, in other categories, in case of cult, while a lot of times we have a very negative impression of cults, sometimes cult can be very gentle also. They are not always violent, aggressive, or criminal. But essentially, the character of a cult is you are, and one person is at the top of the pyramid or this kind of a diamond. wherein that person is the center. A lot of things that they have said, they have defined, are crucial, but the member's voice may or may not be that influential. So it is not a comment on a particular cult that this is the right way or wrong way of doing, but essentially just to objectively identify how they function. Club, a relevant example would be Soho House. You need to qualify to be part of a particular club. Soho House is one example. In case of volunteering, you might come across certain volunteering opportunities which have a skill-based criterion to be part of it. Now, does being a club mean that you're lesser than a community? I don't think so. You can completely function like a club till the time you reach your objectives, goals, creating your group, or a better word I would give to this entire system is cohorts. All of these are cohorts, no judgments around cohort, no connotations. It's a very neutral word, experimentative, scientific. So the way you treat your cohort towards your objectives defines the character of the cohort. And it's completely fine to choose any of these approaches till the time you're able to function well and succeed in your goals. Now, when you have a cohort in place, whether it is consumers, citizens of a city, whether it is the people in the Zoom call, right? We are also right now in this moment a cohort of 40 people. Now, if I have to say that, how can I make this cohort meet again and again? How can I build relationships and bonds between these cohort members? What I'm essentially saying is I want to cultivate commitment between the members of this group. I want to build commitment for a X objective. Let's say to discuss more about community building in the volunteering space and develop new researches, new tactics together, co-creating. But if people don't show up, then that will falter. So to make sure that people show up, you have to cultivate commitment. And when a cohort becomes committed enough, it moves towards being a community. How do you build commitment? First, I think, and there are different frameworks and lenses, right? I have nowhere saying that these are universal laws. It is only to help you make sense of the various efforts that you're undertaking. Building companionship. I often feel that whenever I go for volunteering opportunities or whenever I hear about them, I spend 3 hours with 5 strangers doing one particular activity. But did I make any friends? Did I make any connection? A lot of times that's difficult for strangers because the inertia for two new people to act and collaborate with each other or to probably ask personal questions is difficult. So how you as a community manager or an enabler of this cohort can by design enable these connections to happen. So probably you pair people while during a beach cleanup rather than one person, or you're just letting a cohort of people walking on the beach cleaning. You can create pairs, sort of a buddy program, wherein two people get to have a conversation and also clean the beach at the same time. What you do by this, you make a mundane and boring activity into something meaningful. Those two people might be talking about space or climate change while cleaning the beach, but then they have something in progress, and more likely they exchange numbers, they remain in touch, and next time there is a volunteering opportunity from the same organizers, even if one of them misses, the other person is likely to remind them. They have a greater incentive to come to the next beach cleanup because they have a friend they're likely to meet. It's not only just a mundane beach cleanup activity, which a lot of people might argue against for different reasons. But essentially, I'm coming there to meet my friends, or I'm coming there for a connection that I have. So that way, if you build companionship, you're able to build connections. And when you have enough connection, somewhere you have the seed of commitment. Commitment still is a very long curve kind of a process. Connection can probably happen in the first 15 minutes of that cleanup activity, but commitment does take a longer amount of time. So how do you make sense of such an abstract thing? And if you have to create tactics, how do you go scientifically about it? So consider one of your volunteering cohorts. They must be discovering the volunteer opportunity somewhere. They are likely to feel some of the things that you see on the screen. They might be feeling curious, excited, or they might be feeling skeptical and afraid. How do you make the positive feelings prominent and negative feelings disappear is essentially the design element of it. What kind of colors you choose in your communication, what kind of vocabulary you choose. So probably the same vocabulary cannot work if the person is not comfortable with English. They might feel that it's going to be a kind of an elite gathering, for lack of a better word. And if you make it vernacular, they might feel more welcome, and they might feel that I'm in Bombay or I'm in a city, but I'm still getting an invitation in a language that's closer to me, and I might be more likely to attend that. Similarly, how do you onboard them? What does onboarding look like? In case of a digital platform or a brand, we sign up. We sign up for a service, we sign up for a product, or we might sign up for some sort of functional activity like buying a product. You share your contact details. Onboarding begins at this sign up process. Sign up alone doesn't equate to onboarding, but it begins there. So let's say a volunteer has RSVP. They have indicated interest. Now, how do you onboard them? One of your interventions could be acknowledging that you have received their RSVP, but making the communication of that acknowledgement fun enough so that they feel it's not really an automated email, but it's a personal email where the person recognizes your participation. You channelize the feeling of hopefulness, nurturing that effort. They might be curious, right? You don't already have a committed volunteer, but it's a curious volunteer. How do you convert that curiousness into sincerity? And then once you have, that was a very small example. Bigger brands have a large, elaborate plan of how to design onboarding, and it's one of the most important subsets of community sciences. But let's say hypothetically you have designed a good onboarding mechanism. If you have done that, your cohort members who discovered the opportunity, who have onboarded, now are getting in the engagement cycle. There is, of course, churn. Churn basically means the leakage that you have in this flow. No matter how brilliant your mechanisms or tactics are, you are most likely to have a churn. So don't get bothered by that. Just benchmark that data with reference to the industry standards. So you are getting into the engaging phase. You need to do something more now. You cannot be just telling them that it's a noble activity. It's an interesting thing. It's a rare thing. They have already understood it, and they are there with you. They have reached the engagement stage. Now, how do you make them feel closer to the cause so that if I have a volunteering engagement 2 weeks later and I have signed up today, within these 2 weeks, I might hear so many things. I might see a news clip where people say that beach cleanup is a worst activity. It's not serving any purpose. There are greater systemic problems. So you are constantly competing with so many media sources, so many other activities that people can choose up instead of giving time to your call to action. They might choose to read a book because they might feel that these solutions are not enough. I need to equip myself. And I'm saying all this on good faith that this cohort is sincerely interested. Talking about disinterested people is a separate ballgame, but very sincere, interesting group of people. How do you make sure that your communication and your efforts are keeping them engaged so that they really show up on the day of the activity? The kind of channels you have is WhatsApp, email, but how can you innovate further? Is it feasible for you to send them something? If it is really a big event or big occasion for you, what different can you do? Can you make sure that they get a call before the volunteering engagement, and you try to understand what could be the reasons they might not show up? Is it just slight curiosity, and on the day of the event they might not wake up and not show up? Then you can give reminders. So a lot of things we already do as conventions, but if you try to customize your conventions in a way that they are more contextual, your show up rate or your conversion rate is much higher. And when they actually show up, you feel they reach the phase of leading, right? And when they have reached the phase of leading, you need to reciprocate by appreciating them. You need to reciprocate by making sure that those two people, those few people who really showed up, are somewhere above or different from those who didn't show up. So how do you make sure that they are getting that sense of being needed, that contribution and acknowledgement? So in a digital environment, you do it differently. In an offline environment, you do differently. I'll try to share some case studies which can help you in that direction. And then this particular slide is just a variant of the commitment curve to help you take an example of an online journey, which a lot of people already go through in a social media environment, wherein we sign up for emails on the day one. Then we read a blog. These are all micro actions. So one of my recommendations for any sort of engagement or opportunities, how can you break the journey into smaller pieces, and how can you have reference points that helps you to make the consumer or the volunteer, prospective volunteer, to engage with you better, because you're breaking it narrow. Just giving a call to action that this activity changes the world, I think it's not enough. You break it down further on so that they are able to make sense of it and relate with it. So in social media terms, how does that happen? We sign up for an email. We probably read because it's the most cognitively least effortful thing, right? And nowadays, people are using videos also for product engagement because people's reading abilities are reducing. So instead of read blog, it can be watch a video, which is a short video. Then you create a login, then you read the guidelines, then you post a thread, and then you attend an online workshop. You can naturally see that the commitment levels of all these activities are increasing as it progresses. And that's why even if you have received RSVP, never consider that the people who did not show up are not relevant to you or are not committed enough. It's easy to say that the fault was on their side, that they did not show up, they were not committed enough. But you might revisit your mechanisms and processes to say, was there something different I could have done? Because the disinterested person should be your target. Interested people might come up for a lot of different reasons, which may not be the conscious design of your interventions. But if you are able to catch hold of the most disinterested person, and in the Gandhian style, it's like the last mile person, right? Who is the last mile person in this relationship? Anybody who feels that this is a waste of time. If you're able to catch hold of them, I think you're doing something right. And this commitment curve is essentially an invention of a gentleman called Douglas Atkin, who is the ex-community head of Airbnb, and Carrie Melissa Jones, who is a veteran community builder. She has adapted some of these things. You can find a lot of these resources online. What I'll do in the coming days is with Megha, I'll try to share a larger repository of different resources for you guys. In this sequence of slides also, I do have some resources for you to take screenshots. First of them is 3 important communities that you should really refer while you're trying to understand what is community building. And because I have been blabbering a lot so far, I will make a smart move and play a video here and let you see the video so that you can respond with your comments in the chat and we can have a discussion at the end. So I hope I will just check again if the video is visible. Megha, do let me know if it's visible.
Yes, it's still loading though.
Okay. Let me do one thing. So this is the Airbnb video, and I would urge you to pay attention because it's a very, very interesting and fabulous video.
I can't hear.
Sorry?
I can't hear it.
Oh, you can't hear it. Just a second. Just a second. Let me just share the screen again. Now it should work. Is it working?
Yeah.
All right. So I hope you like the video, and Airbnb is one of my favorite community building initiatives. What excites me most, and that probably would relate with you, is as a company, it has always considered itself much more than just being a hospitality company or just being a travel focused company. And they really know how to communicate that effectively. While there were challenges when Airbnb was launched, whether such a kind of a system would be welcomed by people, will it be able to take like sort of lock horns with a larger hospitality industry, which is a big industry, right? Like a lot of business houses have a hospitality arm. So everybody was uh, curious and anxious that whether such a startup can really create that kind of dent. And today it's a very common name, and it's probably one of the most important startups which has left the place. And they have been a community focused company right from the beginning. Sometimes I dare to even say that during pandemic and a lot of other calamities, for-profit companies like Airbnb have a larger impact than a lot of cause-focused NGOs. Because the kind of muscle they have, the kind of talent they have, the kind of tools they are able to mobilize a lot more during these occasions. And there is, I think, significant amount of learnings the nonprofit space can borrow from these kind of ventures. So I think moving on, I have another video, but I think if you want to spend more time on how Airbnb does its job, there are enough articles, there are enough talks by Douglas Atkin, and you can also go to their webpage called community.withairbnb.com. It can be a good template for you to design your own volunteering activities. It's a travel business, right? So it's a very interest driven kind of a company. You don't go to Airbnb because it's a necessity, but still there is a good amount of community building there. What if there is a scenario that you need help with a problem statement? You are a person who is in a particular situation and you need some help to solve a problem. Then can community come to your rescue? Baby Chakra proved that it can. In fact, this genre of communities focused on motherhood and moms is one of the most popular genres of community across the world, especially India. You will find ample Facebook groups and ample independent applications. Baby Chakra is one of the pioneers and the most successful companies. So we'll see a small intro video of them.
Becoming a mother is an incredible feeling. It's a wonderful new world. But deciding on care, be it doctors, daycares, nannies, or even diapers, is so confusing. I searched online, called family and friends, and got such different views. I felt very lost. That's when a friend told me about Baby Chakra, India's most trusted way to find the right services and information for me and my baby. Smart, simple, and friendly, the Baby Chakra app is all a mom needs. I can chat with thousands of moms around me, read their reviews, and make the right decisions. I found my hospital, play school, and photographer with their help, all right here. Fever, rash, poop, or weight loss. On Baby Chakra, top experts rescue me right when I need them. Even when I want to buy anything for my child, I find unique products here that I don't get anywhere else. I can check out details, chat, bargain, pay, all right here on Baby Chakra. As a mom, I trust Baby Chakra. Download it. It's the only app you'll need. Baby Chakra. Happy mothers every day.
Happy mothers every day. I think great copy, great communication. I'm in two minds to sort of make a case for for-profit ventures doing things with heart, because of course, at heart, they're looking for ROI in business. But in that process, they do make a lot of impact. Imagine the kind of significant help people would have received through the existence of this community. And it's, if we compare Airbnb with this, it's a very different kind of a proposition, because Airbnb is about interest, this is about need. Airbnb mainly sells travel and hospitality. Baby Chakra did not have anything to sell. Baby Chakra was not really, it was a catalyst or facilitator between existing services. All those services that you get on Baby Chakra right from beginning were available. Traditionally, they were available between joint family members. They can be available on Google's, but there was a trust deficit. There was reliability people were expecting. So when the founder Naya Segi and others came together, they identified that first thing they need is to connect with each other. Mothers need to connect with each other, not only for functionality or utility, but also for comfort. Probably the volunteering community that you are making is could be the cause could be something similar to this. Is there a pain point that you can solve for the volunteers so that once you solve the pain point, then you can mobilize them in X direction? What Baby Chakra right now is doing, it created a huge network of moms who needed help with each other. And now it is selling products, services, taking commissions in that process. So community is very central to Baby Chakra. In case of Airbnb, community is a vertical, which is amplifying the brand, which is amplifying their revenues, which is amplifying their efforts and giving them a trusted name. In case of Baby Chakra, without community, Baby Chakra doesn't exist. So other things are an add-on at a later point. So these are two different models, both of which you can consider. And it's like a spectrum, right? All these things are located on a spectrum. You have to identify which model or which approach is closer for you. Taking a third example, which is neither, not really a travel company or a need base, it's a professional group. Just like EIV, you derive value by being part of EIV as people who are trying to mobilize volunteers. Product management is a profession in tech companies. Product managers are essentially people who design the products, who look after how our experience is, and a lot of other functions. India as a country doesn't have university courses or educational institutions which are competent enough for cutting edge product management information. So what people identified who were practicing product managers, that there is a need for education, there is a need for growth space, wherein these practicing product managers can come together and they can help each other, find new problem statements, hone their skills, etc. So we'll have a look at the website and I'll try to do a small audit of the website for you and bring to your notice some of the key things which you can apply on your website. Right, I hope this website is visible. All right, so as soon as you come on the website, you see that it's the world's most passionate product community. Passion is important because if you're not passionate in a profession, most likely you are not looking for, and that's why this messaging is important. The Product Folds is a volunteer-driven community of product managers and enthusiasts who are passionate about making an impact and help everyone grow together. It clearly sends you a signal of what kind of people are there. It's not a closed community where you have to pay something. It's a volunteer-driven community where you can get access and there are going to be a lot of free resources. Does that mean there won't be paid resources? No, but it's just a signal that the entry is not a barrier. What kind of different things happen? Events happen, teardowns. It's a slightly technical term, but which effectively means that they invite product companies, established product companies like Hotstar or Dunzo or Swiggy, and they ask these enthusiasts and practitioners who are probably in college, who are probably working with small startups, who are probably working somewhere else, to just tear it down as a product and identify the faults and improvements which the company can do. So it's more or less like a hackathon, which you guys would be familiar with. So you might exercise this, that you create a teardown for your volunteering community, share your communication assets, compile things at a single place and say, I want people to criticize what I'm doing. I want people to tell me what right things I can do. Then it will be called a teardown. Similarly, there are different verticals. There are jobs also, because people, when they're looking for growth, they're also looking for monetary returns. These are prominent product managers of global brands who are accessible through this community. And these people have a larger incentive to engage with probably a young intern who is part of this group. So imagine the kind of knowledge sharing this kind of a volunteer driven community is able to do. If you look at the design, it is clearly at every point spilling value all across the page. If I scroll it down, at no point I find anything redundant. Every line, every copy is giving me a sense of value, so that the chances of me clicking this action button or exploring further is very high. The storytelling is very neat. The impact is communicated very sharply. So this is how even a volunteering community in a professional space, which is somewhere closer to a for-profit venture, looks like. Now I'm almost coming to the close of my talk, and I would be happy to have questions from you after this, but just give me 1 second so that I can come back. All right, so final sort of a word from my side. I'm not sure if I have emphasized enough that doing community is not essential. You might hear it as a buzzword and people might oversell it to you. And I blame my fellows or fellow community managers that everybody considers community indispensable, which I categorically differ with. The image that I have put on the screen, you can easily understand what I mean. A group is a plain rice, community is a biryani. But if you think you like tawa pulao, it's completely fine. If your business, if your function, if your mood requires for a different dish, it's completely fine. Biryani will have its place. You might have it once in a while, but doesn't mean all other methodologies or approaches are not useful, right? And then there are certain tools and resources then you can benefit from. If you don't agree with me, I'm very much happy to debate and engage further. But a quick grab of the major people I think you should follow. As I said, we'll try to give you a longer list of resources also. David Spinks, Rosie Sherry, Greg Eisenberg, these are the people you can easily find on LinkedIn or Twitter. Unfortunately, I don't have an Indian name here. I have reasons for that, which I can speak separately. In terms of tools, I highly recommend Platform Commons. You should definitely explore that. In fact, the previous talk in EIV webinar was by Satyam of Platform Commons. I think it's a beautiful stack and they're very dedicated to the nonprofit space. Like Minds is a for-profit company, India-based, which is trying to develop a tool where you guys can create your own community solutions. Like WhatsApp is not a community tool. It's just that people open WhatsApp so many times that we have WhatsApp group, but it is a very anti-community tool. Threado is a very business-oriented kind of analytics-heavy tool. You can organize a demo with all these people and try to understand what their product is and find out if they are relevant to you or not. While you have these tools and talented people to follow and learn from, you also have certain spaces where you can hang out and learn more about community sciences. The most prominent and consistent amongst them is Community Food, which happens to be a community for community managers by Like Minds, which is the tool I have recommended. What they do is they pick up interesting topics, they pick up interesting problem statements. In a way, they are trying to be the product folks for community managers. So do check them out. C3 Universe is by another software tool, which I haven't used. That's why I haven't endorsed it. But they are also trying to, and it's always important to be part of these multiple groups so that you're much connected. The final one is CMX Hub, which is started by David Spinks. It's an international group with a lot of chapters. In the past, I had the privilege to be a chapter lead for the Indian edition. But the global Slack group, the global newsletter is indeed powerful. You will get fresh ideas from that space and meet new people. Always reach out to people in Spain, people in other countries, how they are trying to build communities, and take those examples in your journeys. And now, as I promised that I will complete my talk, before I complete, I owe a lot of thanks to three people. One of them is familiar to you, Megha. And I think without Megha, this talk would not have been possible. I think she did a lot of important things in the process to help make this happen. Ashok from Wisdom Tree, whatever you see presentation, he played a significant role in helping me create it. Hussein is a colleague who's a Canva champion, a lot of detailing, or if you really like the PPT, then it's mainly because of Hussein's efforts and Ashok's access to Canva, which I was able to do. I think it was a fun process for me also, and I hope you were able to enjoy. I did have some questions at the end, which I wanted to leave you with, but I see the clock that's already 4:56. So maybe we can just start the interaction, and in between some of these
We
questions
can
can
go
get
ahead,
covered.
Manohar. If you want to start with these questions, we can continue. And Sri Lakshmi, because she has her hand raised for a bit now,
Okay.
I feel if you were in a physical space, I would feel her hands hurting. We should let her speak. But then please feel free to take some more time and talk about these questions.
All right. So, Shri, do you want to go with your question first? Okay, I'm not able to hear you. Are you on mute or am I missing something?
I don't know. Yes, Sri Lakshmi, we
Okay,
asked if you could.
Shri, we are. Yeah, go on, Megha.
I am not sure if there's some internet lag at my end.
Cool. So I'll go with the questions, and Shri can unmute herself whenever she hears and interrupt me. We had floated a Google form wherein some of you had asked interesting questions. What I've tried to do is bring the key pointers of those multiple questions. And the most popular amongst them was, how do you retain volunteers? My expression should change at that question, because it's a problem which big brands with a lot of muscle money also struggle with. Netflix, guys, is losing subscribers. So if you lose volunteers, you're not doing a terrible job. So, but still there are ways to experiment and try out things so that you're able to retain. And to answer this question, I would urge you to go back to the first slide, the acronym picture. If you have those things in place and you repeat them every day, you communicate them effectively, retention is a byproduct of that. You will always have to do interventions and tactics, but if your purpose, identity, and culture is in place, you create stickiness as an outcome of it. And that stickiness is very intangible. A lot of times, people are not able to make sense because it's abstract. It's not really measurable in a very conventional scale like a hard skill. But retention you can measure through some numbers, which are proxy numbers. The way certain tech companies do is, let's say, how does a platform like Spotify measure what is your stickiness on the platform? It says if on day 0 you have come and played for 5 minutes, I will see on day 7 how much time did you spend on my platform. Is that increase from 7 minutes to something more? Okay, it is not increasing. Then what can I do? I can probably bring in a floater button where if you're trying to exit the application, it says, are you sure you want to exit? So that some increase in retention happens. I can probably try to do some customer calls and say, why has your time reduced from day 0, or why hasn't it increased substantially? And people might say that the audio was not clear, or the internet was patchy, that's why I was not able to retain continue listening, or some circumstantial thing happened, or the hardware disconnected, etc. If you draw a parallel between this, you might schedule calls with people who showed up last time and did not show up this time, and try to have a frank conversation. Why did that happen? Probably there was novelty in the first time. Second time, the novelty got lost. Probably they were excited to meet new people, and after meeting those people, they said, I don't find these people interesting. My purpose of socializing is not happening. So next time I'm not coming. Or probably they are too communist, or I am too right, or I am too left. People make very subconscious derivations, right? So how do you create an experience so that your hook for the attendees is not just the cause, it's something around the cause. It can be people, it can be the experience, it can be the food dish. Really, if you club a volunteering meeting along with an interesting food destination or a food walk or some sort of a session which is different and fun, the chances of coming back are higher. I seriously feel that I'm not blaming anyone, but if you really feel that social work is noble and people should do it out of nobility, unfortunately, we are not living in that reality. So I have equal chance of engaging with a for-profit entity where the experience is more fun and enriching versus a noble NGO, which is very genuine and trying to do good stuff. But if I don't enjoy it, I get bored, I will leave. That is unfortunately the reality. So I hope the pedagogical way of doing things, I think, is the most important takeaway. The way for-profits do it, they drive purchase actions from you on e-commerce websites or shopping malls. There are a lot of behavioral insights that you can draw and implement in your journeys. The second question is a very
Manohar,
powerful one.
sorry, I
Yes.
want to ask a question before this you jump into it. Is that
Yes.
so a lot of us might want to start building a community or may have already started building a community or a group. How long do you think a person should wait to actually start expecting people to start engaging? I know we discussed about biryani and slow cooking it. If you could talk about that.
You just steal my moment. I wanted to say that expression, but you already said it. So slow cooked food and fast food, I think, is the best way to describe it. If you're looking for something nutritious, something healthy, we all know some of us have been in the kitchen, or simple fact, like even if you're ordering food from outside, things which are freshly prepared cannot be delivered in 10 minutes. So I think founders, leaders who are expecting their team members to build communities first need to make peace with, first, that community may not be necessary for me. If it's necessary, then do I have the patience to really do it the right way? The worst thing that you can do for your brand is make a bad community. Because if people start dropping off, you have more people talking less good things or not so good things about you than people talking about bad things. You are better off by not doing community building if you are not doing it in the right way. And this is one of the personal problems that I have struggled with. I was working with a startup called Cuckoo FM many years back. It is still a good name in the vernacular space. They wanted to be YouTube of audio, regional audio back in 2018. Gradually, they realized that this path is not working. Being a YouTube of audio is not a great idea. We want to be a Netflix or an Amazon Prime of audio. And they have become that. So I'm saying that the community was not for them. They experimented with it for a year, but they then pivoted, which was the right decision. It's a very valuable startup nowadays. But why did they pivot? Because the quality of content which was getting created by community members was not good enough for the listeners. So they realized that if we try to match make this poor quality with listener, my marketing budget is getting spent. I'm bringing customers, but then they're leaving because they don't have good content. So instead of putting my budget into community department, if I hire professionals, record audiobooks, record the right content, then whatever expenditure I'm making in the marketing department, I am at least able to justify that and sort of make the best out of it. So I will pivot. Similarly, if you feel like making a volunteer community is not for you, don't do it. Make a club, make a network, make a partnership model where probably somebody else is making a community of your volunteering cohort and you're deriving value out of it. So you have to be very objective and scientific in that process. I hope I sort of answered this. And okay, last word is, how do you keep scale and joy? Very difficult. Sometimes you're not able to do that and you have to make peace with that on a high scale, there cannot be the benefit of a boutique community. Apart from making peace, you can always decentralize and fragment the larger community into smaller cohorts and groups so that independently those cohorts and groups have that joy of a boutique community in place. I think that is the sweet spot between scale and community. It's very challenging, but yes, it's possible. And you can use tools, right, for that. If you use the right softwares which are designed thoughtfully, give you the necessary features, then you are able to manage such a large group without compromising on the emotional experience of being in that community. I have already covered some softwares and will try to give you more results. But one key thing, WhatsApp is not a community tool. I can go on record to say that if anybody hates me, WhatsApp is an anti-community tool. No community tool would inform everybody who has left the group. That is not needed, but it is designed for families. It is designed for different use cases. And the community feature which you have in WhatsApp right now is not a community feature. That is not community. It's an announcement board. You really need to look at genuine community products which are in beta levels or MVP levels, wherein you can really see how those features and functions work. The third thing is remote building. Yeah. Yes, Shri.
On that tool, I wanted to ask one question. Look, one of the things with non-profit space is that So the thing with profit spaces are all the examples you showed also, right? Airbnb or Baby, whatever. They all have a digital product and people come into that product and use it. But when you are starting off either as a non-profit or something where you want to spend less, and the tools that are available, you can't build your own tool. I mean, that's not always the get-go. And also, depending on the type of community, people would not want to get onto another like app or another service and stuff like that, right? So, what is your thoughts, examples, or insights on for people who want to build a community but don't have necessarily the resources to like build something on their own, but work with what is already there between WhatsApp or Facebook and like Notion or this and that, right? Like, do you have any thoughts on that? Just to start, that's also an experiment in its own way, and depending on how your community is responding, you can inform your tool when you're building.
Completely. So nowhere I mean that a white label tool is the answer. By tool, I just mean anything which is accessible and doable for the time being. But the problem that happens is if you create a WhatsApp group of 200 people in a span of 6 months, and then you realize that you want to do more experiments later, then the cost of that migration from one platform to another is much higher than what you would invest right at the beginning. So if you're really running a business which has community at its heart. So for example, Airbnb, when it started, the first focus for Airbnb would not be to build a community. It would be, oh, I'm not audible, Preeti says. Am I audible to others?
Yeah, Manohar, you're audible.
Okay, cool. So I was saying that Airbnb would not have made a community, let's say for first 6 months or 1 year. The first job was create an inventory of interested enough people who can lend their living rooms or outhouses on this platform. Whether they're doing it for community money, no problem. They must have given those hosts a lot of incentives, burned a lot of money. But they did that because they wanted to build the inventory, because community was not at the heart of it. In case of Baby Chakra, you have to find moms in problem, moms who can take initiative and create a close group of people who can really drive activity in your community. So in terms of economics, if you cannot afford it, then I would say that probably doing it slow is important, but you have to do it. There is no other way beyond a tool. So even if you're using Notion, there will be a paid plan. If you're using Slack, there will be a paid plan. So you will have to do the expenditure. When you do it is just the difference. And I think being community oriented right from the beginning and using a white label is a sustainable approach, according to me, because the existing tools don't have that kind of sustainability, and the cost later would be much higher.
That's a good perspective. Just to follow up on the economics of it, what is your thoughts on non-profits? Let's say charging for a group of people to come to them. It's not like subscription or something. It's more like from a behavioral perspective, it's for the community to commit. You say the charge is for, we are going to train you XXX, but at the same time, it's also inclusive of you being part of this community. And it from a behaviorally for the community member also, it will be like, okay, I've committed for this. It's like committing before for your gym, right? You pay beforehand for 6 months or 3 months. Is that a practice? I know only one NGO that does that, but I don't know whether they are sustaining that model. But any thoughts on that? Whether they can think along those lines? That's my last. I'm not going to ask question.
No problem. So I think what I gathered from your question is it's less of a community question and it's more of a customer acquisition question. That how do you acquire
it's more
the
like
right people?
It's more like, sometimes community is romanticized and said, I'm building a community. And
Correct.
It's like charity versus creating making it monetarily out of it. For profits, there are for profits that is built on just community. It's not the product that they are giving. I am building a community, and if you are this type of a community member, you pay X amount. for this many years, and this, if you're this type of a community member, you pay X amount for this many years, right? A for-profit easily will do that. But for a not-for-profit, if it is an option where you can just have an upfront payment, it need not be big, it need not be divided. Is that an
Get it.
option?
I don't think so. It's an option, because even for-profit companies, like whether you use a payment gateway or anything, you get vouchers, you get a lot of incentives in return. So I think somewhere the structural change that has to come in the non-profit space is the funders realizing that if you want to engage with today's crowd and volunteers, you have to dedicate some amount of budgets for this and this tactic. What you can appraise the NGO or the efforts is probably how correct or how likely are they to succeed. But I don't think so that charging people at the right beginning is a good way to go about it. What it may end up doing is it will create that, again, barrier of privilege and who is able to afford it and whether it is accessible or not. So I think I personally don't see that as a very plausible suggestion approach. But yes, the funders definitely need to look at it, and probably Megha and other guys can influence some of it.
Then there's a question from Team Inclusive Dunya: is how open are people to signing up to a new tool, Manohar?
People are lazy and they have lots of inertia.
That's why they stick to WhatsApp, maybe.
Yes, and circling back to the cost of migration aspect, Facebook groups is almost dying, but it was like the baby of community building in very beginning. And a lot of communities lost people while doing that migration because you don't have control on these big platforms. Same happens on LinkedIn. LinkedIn groups did not fly off very well. WhatsApp groups was, I strongly believe that WhatsApp never imagined itself to be used in the ways we end up using it. It was meant for a different purpose, but then the market shaped a lot of its features and use cases. So I think people are not, and that's why you should choose the tool more thoughtfully and patiently. I think, again, let's compare tools with foods, right? What would you try? You need a taster of that. It needs to be veg. People have a lot of parameters. So I think the inertia is very high, and you should try to see where people are already hanging out and can you start there. So once you capture people where they are hanging out, then probably you can make bridges between. If your community is on Instagram, be present on Instagram. Don't judge Instagram. If your community is present on X place, you go there and then try to build a bridge backwards and bring those people to wherever you want them to.
Thanks. Thanks. If you have more questions, please put in chat. I've also put a feedback form for you to fill out. This also has the access to the EIB WhatsApp group that we're trying to build with help from Manohar. Gitika will let you ask a question. I'll just use my power and ask one more question because I have it, and then we'll let you ask. So, Manohar, in the volunteering space, we have figured that volunteer management is a full-time role, right? You can't expect somebody to manage and engage volunteers by doing it a part-time thing, right? Do you think that's also true for community managers, people who are trying to build a community? Because I sometimes feel it's not enough work for people to, and you're also a professional community manager. So if you could briefly talk about that, and then Gitika can ask the question.
Keeping my biases aside, because it used to be my bread and butter very recently, I would say that it is a full-time job. The number of jobs in community management are increasing because brands and outfits are realizing.
Yeah, also in non-profit space, sorry, Manohar, in the fact that,
So I think in this particular question's case, the structure of the organization doesn't, the nature of the organization doesn't influence as much versus the goals that you have. So like if I'm a bank, I don't need to build a community and need not have a community manager. But if I'm a startup and I'm fighting against a Goliath, then I need to have a community manager. So if you are a well-established NGO and you can achieve your results without hiring a community manager as a full-time asset, very much do that. There are consultancies where these things can happen, or somebody might come in, do the strategy work for you, make a blueprint for you, and you can have an operations person also to implement the tactics with participation from the community professional. But I think never confuse a community manager with a social media manager. Just handling Instagram followers is not community management. Just doing operations is not community. Just doing communications is not community.
And HR?
Interesting part is community manager is a position which is it's like a hub and spoke model. It interacts with all these departments that I named, but none of these professionals are themselves adapt to take up the role of community manager. They can work with them, they can be trained to that level, but I think community management is itself an independent function, and there is value in investing in that. So HR also, like you said, I strongly believe that at least in case of brands or a volunteering community, the community manager is very much the HR. You have to recruit, you have to retain, and you have to flourish. So the goals are similar, just that you don't have to be so boring as HR people.
Thanks. Gitika, over to you to ask a question. Manohar, there are questions in chat if you can look at and then answer them.
I love them. Please keep them coming. If you're hesitating, don't hesitate. So Gitika, I'm waiting for you. Okay, you have typed your question. My previous organization's team manager and team lead rarely used to communicate or convey over on official channels such as Microsoft Teams to create a community on Slack. However, there was organizational community over on Yammer such as Women Network. However, it was a rampant practice to wish each other on birthdays or on team WhatsApp group. Someone would leave the WhatsApp group as well. So Gitika, I agree with that statement. I hate it. I often DM people that please don't text these messages because there will be a drop in the membership whenever I have managed groups. Because some people are very expressive and they feel like I'm a part of a free community, right? So why do I have to think how other person will behave or act, which you as a community manager broadly have your eyes on? So this does happen. And your follow-up statement is, don't you think there should be a practice for official communication via such mediums? I don't understand what you mean official communication. I think the lines are partially, and they should blur, right? I would like to be in a workspace where I feel belong. How do you create belonging? You don't create belonging just by talking about OKRs and KRAs. You definitely want to know people. Birthdays is a conventional way of doing that. You may come up with new things. During pandemics, there were new tools and interesting tools wherein people were matchmake together because you were working from home. I could probably meet with a new colleague because the AI tool or the Slack bot has matched me with an X person, and I show up in that meeting. So I think a lot of these things have a good side to it. I do agree that they are not implemented well, and that's why probably you have this inference, and I also resonate with it. Correct. So I think, yes, so there should be space for it. There should be demarcation. I think that allows me to say that a good community manager would be able to balance these things off. And they could be able to weigh those practices better and be a good advisor to the HR and to other people. I hope that addresses.
There's a question by Preeti.
Yeah. Yes. For nonprofits, how do you call to cause to get maximum people to join? As you said, when it is just of nobility, there is not as much people who want to commit. So I love this question, Preeti, because I know scale is important. And in case of nonprofits, you have to justify your existence with impact. But let me ask you a question that a business also has this obligation. It has to drive sales. It has to drive purchases. It has to drive subscriptions. How do they think about it? I would leave you with that question. And I think you have the answer. All of us have the answer. But it's somewhere probably, I think, while being in the thick of our jobs, we somewhere forget. Try to distance yourself from the role that you're playing and probably think how you behave in other communities. What do you expect of other communities that you are part of? And probably draw parallels, and then most likely you will find answers. This is not to dodge off your question. Happy to be available speaking further. But I think I would leave that question to everyone, that try to draw parallels between the brands that you engage with, the purchases that you do, what influences you. Can you borrow those tactics for yourself? And I would please
Yeah.
allow me to move to the new question or the next question. Yeah.
Sorry. So while we can stop recording, Karthikeya, and we can continue the questions, I would request everyone to please fill the feedback form. And Manohar, I want to ask you